Quick, without looking, what did you have for lunch 3 Tuesdays ago? What was the phone number of your childhood best friend? What is the exact order of the last 10 songs you listened to? For most of us, the answer is a blank, a shrug. Gone. We live surrounded by machines that remember everything for us, our phones, our photos, our endless clouds of data, and quietly, without ever noticing, we have become a species that barely remembers anything at all. Now imagine a world with none of that. No writing, no paper, no photographs, no way to store a single fact anywhere outside of a living human skull. In that world, if you forgot something important, it was not backed up. It was not saved. It was simply gone forever. So here is a question that turns out to be far stranger and far bigger than it first sounds. How did ancient humans remember everything? Because they had to. For tens of thousands of years, there were no books, no libraries, no notes, no records of any kind whatsoever. And yet these people carried inside their heads an absolutely staggering amount of knowledge. Everything the group knew about how to stay alive, every plant, every animal, every law, every story, every ancestor existed in exactly one place: human memory. If it was not remembered, it did not exist. A forgotten fact could mean a poisoning, a lost trail, a broken tradition, a death. Memory was not a hobby or a party trick or something you did to pass an exam. Memory was survival itself. And it turns out our ancestors were absolute masters of it, in a way that would genuinely make your head spin. We did not just remember a little more back then. We remembered on a level that almost every modern human has completely lost. So let's rebuild that vanished world and the astonishing tricks the human mind once used to hold all of it. Start with the sheer scale of what an ancient human simply had to know. We tend to picture our ancestors as simple, even primitive. They were nothing of the sort. A hunter-gatherer had to carry a living encyclopedia of the entire natural world inside their skull. Think about the plants alone. In a single landscape, there might be hundreds upon hundreds of different species, and for every one of them, you needed to know. Is it food, or is it poison? Which part do you eat? The root, the leaf, the seed? When exactly is it ripe? Where does it grow? Is it a medicine? Does it heal a wound, or settle a sick stomach, or stop a bleeding, or bring down a fever? Get just one of those facts wrong, confuse the nourishing root with the deadly one that looks almost identical growing right beside it, and you could be dead by nightfall. Now pile on the animals. The tracks of every creature, their calls, their droppings, their habits, and their moods, their migrations, when they mate, where they drink, and exactly how they behave in the moment they turn dangerous. Now add the land itself. Every ridge, every hidden water source, every safe cave and sheltered valley across a territory larger than a modern city. Now add the sky, the stars that guide you, the moon that pulls the tides, the seasons written across the whole turning year. A single ancient elder could hold more hard, practical life-or-death knowledge about their living world than most of us today hold about anything at all. And it was not only survival facts. It was the entire identity of the group. Who is related to whom, going back many generations? Who married into which family? Who owes what to whom? And which old debts and old insults are still remembered? The laws, the rules, the sacred agreements that held the peace, the history of the whole people, the great migrations, the famous ancestors, the origin of the land and the sky and the world itself. All of it, every last piece, had to live inside living human minds and be passed faithfully from one generation to the next, or it would vanish like breath on a cold morning. So how on earth did they actually do it? How do you reliably carry an entire library inside your head and hand it down, intact, for 1,000 years, with not one single word of it written down? The answer is that ancient humans did not remember the lazy way we try to today. They did not simply hear a fact and hope that it stuck. They built powerful, deliberate technologies of memory, techniques so effective that the very best of them remain, to this very day, completely unbeaten. And the first and greatest of these was not writing. It was something far older and far more human. It was the story. Here is a strange truth about the brain sitting inside your head. It is genuinely terrible at remembering dry, disconnected facts. A list of random words, a string of numbers, a bare instruction with no context. These slide back out of your mind almost as fast as they went in. But wrap that exact same information inside a story, with characters and drama and danger and cause and effect, and suddenly your brain grips it like glue and will not let go. We are, right down in our bones, a storytelling animal. And ancient humans understood this instinctively and completely. So they did not teach their most important knowledge as a set of facts. They hid it inside stories. The location of a distant water source, the one that only fills after a certain kind of rain, becomes a gripping tale about a dying hero and a clever animal that leads him to it. The warning about a deadly stretch of coastline becomes a terrifying myth about a hungry monster that lives beneath those exact waves. A hard social rule about who you are and are not allowed to marry becomes an unforgettable, dramatic legend about the disaster that struck two lovers who broke it. The story was the container. The knowledge was the precious cargo hidden inside. And because the story was gripping and emotional and often frightening or funny, it survived, carrying its life-saving payload safely across the centuries. And they made those stories stickier still, with rhythm and rhyme and song. This is another deep secret of how memory works. It absolutely loves a beat. Think about how you cannot forget the words to a song you last heard as a child, even one you have not heard in 20 years. The moment the tune begins, the words are just there, while you struggle to recall a plain sentence someone said to you 5 minutes ago. Rhythm and melody are like rails that carry the mind smoothly forward, and rhyme snaps each word firmly into place, because only one word will fit both the sound and the meaning at the very same time. Ancient knowledge was, again and again, sung and chanted and drummed, precisely because a melody is a memory machine. An epic poem, many thousands of lines long, could be held word-perfect in a single memory for an entire lifetime because it rode along on the rhythm. The oldest human wisdom did not sound like a dry lecture. It sounded like music. But here a doubt creeps in. Surely, you might think, over hundreds of years, these spoken stories would drift and change and fall apart like a game of telephone whispered down the generations until the message is nonsense. And this is where the ancient world will surprise you, because those cultures were fanatical about accuracy. The knowledge was too important to get wrong, so they built in safeguards. The rhythm and the rhyme themselves acted as an error check. If a keeper misremembered a line, it would break the beat, and everyone listening would know. The stories were performed in public, again and again, in front of elders who had heard them 1,000 times and would sharply correct any mistake. In some traditions, there were multiple trained keepers who cross-checked one another, and getting the sacred words exactly right was a solemn, sometimes life-and-death duty. This was not a sloppy game of telephone. This was a living archive, obsessively maintained. And we have astonishing proof that it worked. There are oral traditions alive today that appear to have preserved real events across almost unimaginable spans of time. Along the coasts of Australia, Aboriginal peoples tell detailed stories of a time when the shoreline lay far out where open sea now rolls, when islands were still hills you could walk to on dry land. And scientists studying the rising oceans have found that these coastlines really did flood, exactly as the stories describe, at the end of the last ice age, more than 10,000 years ago. Think about that. A piece of true information, passed by mouth alone, through hundreds of human generations, arriving in our time still accurate. There are stories that seem to remember volcanoes that last erupted 7,000 years ago, and meteor strikes, and vanished landscapes. Memory, done properly, without a single written word, could reach back further than all of recorded history. But the deepest, most powerful memory technique of all was something else again. Something so effective that when modern scientists rediscovered it, they were genuinely stunned. Ancient humans, it seems, grasped that the human brain has one truly superhuman ability. It is extraordinary at remembering places. Think about it for a moment. You can walk, in your mind, through a house you lived in as a small child and see, room by room, exactly where everything sat. Our ancestors were navigators to their core, and their minds evolved to hold vast, richly detailed maps of physical space. And they learned to hijack that power for everything else. The trick is this. You take the pieces of knowledge you want to hold, and you attach each one in your imagination to a specific place along a route you know intimately. A particular rock, a certain twisted tree, a bend in the river, a lone hill on the horizon. Then, to recall it all, you simply take a walk in your mind along that path, and at each spot, the memory is waiting for you, exactly where you left it. Often the stranger and more vivid the image, the better it sticks. The landscape itself becomes your library, your notebook, your hard drive. This technique is completely real, it works astonishingly well, and a version of it, later called the Memory Palace, was prized by the great memorizers of the ancient world, and is still used by world memory champions today to recall the order of dozens of shuffled decks of cards. Our ancestors may well have been using it, out under the open sky, tens of thousands of years before anyone carved a single letter. Picture how it might actually work. Say you need to remember which plants heal and which ones kill. You take your daily walk to the river, and at the first great boulder, you imagine the good root bursting up through the stone, glowing and delicious. A little further, at the split tree, you picture the deadly berry, but wrapped around a snarling skull so you can never mistake it. At the riverbank, you see the leaf that stops bleeding pressed to a bright red wound. Now the knowledge is no longer a boring list that slips away. It is a journey, full of vivid, shocking, unforgettable pictures, tied to real places your feet already know by heart. Walk the path, in your body, or just in your mind, and the whole pharmacy recites itself, in order, without a single word written down. That is not a magic trick. That is simply how a memory without paper was built to work. And you can still see the ghost of this idea in some of the most mysterious places on Earth. Think of the great songlines of Aboriginal Australia, among the oldest continuous threads of knowledge on the entire planet, where whole journeys across hundreds of miles of trackless desert are woven into songs, each verse tied to a real feature of the land along the way, so that to sing the song in order is to navigate the country and to carry with you everything important that lives at each place. Think of the ancient monuments and the deep painted caves and the rings of carved standing stones, which a growing number of researchers now suspect were not only art or temples, but memory spaces, physical anchors where crucial knowledge was performed and stored and handed on generation after generation. The line between a sacred site and a hard drive may be far, far thinner than we ever imagined. And when the landscape was not enough, ancient humans built small, portable memory machines they could hold in their hands. All over the world, people carved notches into bones and sticks to keep count of days and moons and debts. They tied knots into cords, an idea that would later grow in the Andes into the astonishing quipu, bundles of knotted strings that could record numbers and census data and possibly whole histories, read by running them through the fingers. They strung beads into belts and carved marks into wooden message sticks carried between distant groups and made intricate string figures held between the hands, each one a prompt for a particular story. These objects did not hold the knowledge by themselves. They were keys. A trained mind, holding the right carved stick or knotted cord, could unlock and recite an entire body of memory exactly and in order every single time. Now, in a world that ran entirely on human memory, one kind of person became priceless beyond all measure: the elder. Today, it is easy to be a little dismissive of old age, to treat the old as frail and slow and out of date. But for an ancient human, an old person was very close to the most valuable thing the entire group possessed, because an elder who had lived 70 or 80 long years was a living library, holding decades of irreplaceable knowledge that existed nowhere else on the face of the earth. They remembered the great drought of 60 years ago and, crucially, exactly what the people had done to live through it. They remembered the once-in-a-lifetime flood, the killing winter, the strange sickness, the famine, the rare disasters that struck only once or twice in an entire human life, and the hard-won, blood-bought lessons of each one. When a crisis fell on the group that no young person had ever seen before, it was the deep memory of the oldest among them that could save every other life. To lose an elder, then, was not only a private grief. In a very literal, very real sense, it was a library burning to the ground. Every single death erased a world that could never be rebuilt. And this is exactly why passing that memory safely to the young was among the most important duties any ancient society had. There was an obligation, sacred and constant and never finished, to hand the knowledge down before it could be lost. Children grew up utterly saturated in the stories, the songs, the names, the rules, hearing them told and sung again and again around the nightly fire until the words were carved permanently into them. In many cultures, there were special, chosen people whose entire life's work was to hold the collective memory of the people. The keepers, the bards, the elders of the mysteries, trained for years, sometimes decades, to carry the epics and the laws and the long chains of ancestors flawlessly, and then to pass every word of it, perfectly, to the next keeper in the line. It was a relay race with no finish line at all, running across thousands of years, and the baton being passed from hand to hand was pure, living memory. But then something happened that changed the human mind forever. We invented writing, and it feels like the single greatest upgrade in our entire history, and in so many ways, of course, it truly was. Suddenly, knowledge could be frozen and stored outside the fragile human body. It no longer had to die when the person holding it died. A fact written down could outlast 100 generations, sitting there perfectly preserved, waiting. Writing gave us history and science and law and eventually every single book and screen you have ever laid eyes on. It is arguably the most important thing our species ever invented. And yet, it came with a hidden price. And, remarkably, someone at the very dawn of it noticed. There is a famous old story handed down from ancient Greece in which a king is presented with the brand new gift of writing, and instead of being delighted, he is deeply uneasy. He warns that this clever invention will not strengthen human memory, but quietly weaken it. That people will stop troubling to remember things for themselves and start trusting the dead marks on the page instead. That they will come to seem wise, because they have read a great deal, while actually carrying very little real knowledge inside their own minds. Thousands of years ago, standing at the birth of writing, someone looked at it clearly and predicted, almost exactly, what it would one day do to us. Because he was right. The moment you can write a thing down, you no longer have to remember it. And the moment you no longer have to remember it, slowly, quietly, you stop being able to. This is the great silent trade sitting at the very heart of human history. We handed our memories over to our tools, first to writing, then to the printed page, then to the photograph, and now to that glowing rectangle in your pocket, which loyally remembers your appointments, your friends' faces, your family's birthdays, even your own phone number, so that you never, ever have to. Scientists even have a name for it now, the way we instantly forget any fact we know we can simply look up again. They call it digital amnesia. We have gained the entire recorded knowledge of our species, an unimaginable glittering treasure. But in the trade, we quietly lost the extraordinary, muscular, deeply trained memory that every single one of our ancestors once carried around as a matter of course, without even thinking about it. The trade was almost certainly worth making. But make no mistake, it was a trade. And most of us never even knew that we made it. So the next time your mind goes suddenly, frustratingly blank, and your hand reaches, all on its own, for your phone to remember some small thing for you, pause, just for a second, and think of them. The hunter who held 1,000 plants, and their poisons and their cures, alive in his head. The elder who was a living library of 80 hard-won years. The keeper who could sing a history 10,000 lines long, from the first word to the last, without a single mistake. For almost the entire human story, stretching back into the deep dark of time, there were no records at all. There were only people, and the fragile, brilliant, absolutely staggering power of what they could hold inside their own minds. They did not have one single word written down anywhere in the world. And somehow, against all of it, they remembered everything. Thanks for watching. If you love the huge hidden stories buried inside the most ordinary parts of being human, subscribe and stick around, because next time we are digging into another strange, forgotten corner of the world of ancient humans.